In this video, I'll show you how to use Google Sheets to create a scatter plot, make a regression line, and compute R² for a small set of data. First thing is you'll have to have your data typed into Google Sheets. The way that I have this set up is that I have my X variable first and then any Y variables afterwards. And you can select the variables that you need by clicking on the top of a column and then push Command or Control and click on the next column that you need to use. You can even create some space if you need to use one column for X and then another one for Y. They don't need to be next to each other. So I'm going to use time for X and then volume of cold water for Y. And then I'm going to insert a chart, and then automatically Google Sheets comes up with a plot that they think is going to be correct. So in this case, a scatter plot is correct. But if you need to change your plot, go to the setup and then choose the chart type to be the scatter plot that you think looks best. And I'm choosing the one with the points so I can see the data. And then I'll move this around a little bit. Now I am using a data set that has cold water to it, so I'm going to keep this blue color for the points so that it kind of makes sense with the data that I'm working with. Automatically, the axis labels and title are pulled in from the data set, and you can edit them by double-clicking on them. A couple other things that you want to add to your chart to make more sense of it is to customize it, and we're going to choose the series. So there's a couple options down here. We are going to click on the box for trend line, and then that puts the least squares regression line through the data. Now, I also know that it's going to be a simple linear regression line, and that's going to be a straight line because the type here in this box is linear. If you ended up picking a different option like polynomial, it would use a polynomial equation to best fit the line. But we are working with simple linear regression. If you want to change the line color, you can choose a different color from that option there. I'm choosing the same color that matches my data points. Another thing we want to do is we want to show R². So that shows us the percent of variation in the volume of the water that is explained by time. So the higher R² is, the closer to 1 or 100%, the better our data, not the better the data is, but the better the model is. And then just above that box, show R², you want to choose a label and use equation. So now we have the equation of the line in the scatter plot. I don't like seeing the equation of the line up here on the top, so you can go to the another option, the legend, and then I tend to move the legend off to the right side. Now, the one thing about seeing this equation is that it's not a full equation. It is going to give you the slope and then the x value and then the y-intercept, but it doesn't say y equals as you are used to seeing an equation. But not much we can do about that. And then R² is followed right afterwards. So if you want to end up doing another scatter plot, then we just start all over with our graph. We can find ways to add the data all together. We can add another series of data if we want to. We could click on double click back on the data, add a series, click on the little select data range, and there's my third variable selected. Oopsie. There we go. Okay, so now we have another set of data right on top of our scatter plot, which is really helpful. And it's going to choose, Google Sheets is going to automatically choose a different color for our data set. So if we wanted to customize it, we could go to the series and then choose the other series. So I added in hot water second. So if I wanted to change hot from red, coincidentally, love that color for this variable, you could also choose a slightly different color of red if you wanted to, but having a color that kind of makes sense with the context of the data is really helpful. And then you'll want to add the trend line, and it only does the trend line to that series of data. We want it linear. I want the label to be use equation, and then I'm going to show R squared. So now I have the equation for the other data set. If I wanted to put all of this data into one big group and ignore the labels of hot and cold, then what I'd end up doing is putting all the data into one column instead of having separate columns. And I do realize now that I had changed one of the values in my data set here. I could go back and edit that to 10. I change the number and then it's going to change the data automatically there in the graph. So there we have it. We have a scatter plot with multiple variables with the same x-axis variable, and we have different colors. We have the trend line or the simple linear regression line, and we also have R squared on the plot.